Hi, morning everyone. Morning. Thank you. So I'm replacing Mukesh here. He sends his apologies for not being able to make it. He had a US trip last week and fell ill after coming back. So hopefully I'll do justice to the topic here, which is a fairly large and vast topic. If all of us collectively spend a couple of days contemplating and debating on this topic, probably at the end of 2 days we won't have a substantial output to show for the effort that we put in. Let me do some justice over the next 45 minutes to take you through the journey of how brand building is changing with the advent of technology and internet in the last 3-4 years. I'll take the perspective of a typical traditional brand manager because I have that slightly rare perspective of spending substantial time in the traditional brand building world with the FMCG companies. I spent about 7 years with HUL and about 2 years with Heinz in India. And the last 4 years have been in the digital marketing world with Flipkart trying to build one of the largest online brands in the country. So let me try and put these two perspectives together on how the brand building journey has been for the traditional world and how the advent of technology is changing a lot of these processes and steps that we used to follow in the traditional brand building models. And let me take you through some of the concepts that still hold good and some of the concepts that actually will change with the advent of technology. And try and put a bridge between the two worlds. Alright, so let's first start with the brand marketing process itself. So how does the typical process looks like? And this has been in vogue for several years now and probably decades, and most of you should be able to relate to this process. So you start with the brand's objectives. Largely you say, what's my share objective, or if I'm launching a new product, what's my objective on the new product? Then you start with a very sharply defined target audience, right? And you come up with a consumer insight for that target audience. You come up with a proposition which answers that insight and puts your product in, makes it relevant to the consumer. And then you bring in the creatives. So your creatives then develop your proposition into a manner which is fairly engaging for the consumer. And that's the role of the creative coming into the process. And then once you have the creative developed and everybody in the hierarchy has signed it off, you actually deploy it using multiple channel options and you bring in the media agency which makes the plan and makes your communication reach out to the audience that you intend to reach out to. Right? And at every step you have the consumer feedback loop coming in and you keep refining and iterating over it till you get the final product which is ready to go out in front of the consumers. It's a fairly elaborate process, takes about a couple of quarters to finally get the output out when you started from step 1. Right? That's how it has worked for us typically in the FMCG industry. And let me confess, the role of a brand manager is fairly interesting. Alright, we have various sources of data that come to us. We have the AC Nielsen data which tells us which brands are growing, what is your market share, it tells us what is your distribution, what is your numeric distribution, what is your weighted distribution. You have the household panel data which comes and tells you how many people are consuming your products, to what extent are they consuming, is consumption the larger opportunity or is penetration the larger opportunity. You have your brand health tracks which tell you how many people are aware of your brand, how many people are considering your brand, how many people have tried it and how many people are actually repeating your brand. So you put a lot of these different sources of information together and find out what should be my growth hypothesis for next year. If you see opportunity in consumption, you actually go down that path. If you see opportunity in increasing penetration for the brand, you actually go down that path. You could have problems at multiple steps of awareness, consideration, trial and repeat. So it's a fairly interesting job and things are fairly clear, or things have been fairly clear when we have tried to embark on how do we grow this brand or how do we grow this portfolio. Now things get a little complicated with the advent of technology and as we move from the industrial era into the digital era. So let me try and put some context to the change as marketers, and I would like to refer to a book here which I found fairly interesting in trying to put a lot of these changes together. It's a book by Professor Neeraj Dawar. It's called The Tilt. How many of you have read the book? Alright, so let me give you some context. I don't see any hand up. So the book is about moving, or it's about the end of the mass era. Alright, so the book talks about how we have come from an industrial era which was about maximizing production capacity. So typically companies would invest in an asset. It's a production capacity in which you have invested fair amount of money. It's a fairly large investment. And then all the downstream activities of the company are trying to maximize the ROI on that investment. So your capacity is producing thousands, millions and lakhs of units and you're trying to sell that capacity into the market. So as a result, you are in a model of mass production, mass marketing, and mass distribution. Right? Everything is trying to appeal to the highest common denominator or highest common factor. And you're not customizing it at all given the large numbers that you're chasing and given the need to optimize your investment on that capacity. Right? So that's the context in the entire brand building model has been worked. The model that I referred to in my earlier slide, it comes from the need to maximize the ROI on the investment that companies have put down. Now move to the digital world. Is manufacturing the largest asset that companies have today? Probably not for most categories. So manufacturing has been largely outsourced and everybody now has access to a variable cost base versus a fixed cost base, which was earlier. Similarly, marketing is becoming much more personalized now than it was earlier. Right? And your distribution has becoming on demand. You don't need to put inventory across various points in the supply chain. You can put inventory on one place and it will get distributed to the entire country from one corner of the country. So the entire paradigm has shifted about how we were operating earlier in an industrial era to now digital era, making customization possible at mass scale. So you don't need to operate on the mass paradigm anymore. So that's the fundamental premise of the book, and would be a useful read to get a lot of context into why some of the changes are happening in the business world around us. Right? So with that as a brief context and background, let me go back to the brand building process that we saw earlier. So the first step in that process was about understanding consumer insight and developing a proposition which would connect your brand to the consumer. Now how has that changed? It's no longer a single target group anymore. The gospel that we used to work with as brand marketers was about sharply defining a very, very narrow target audience in terms of demographics, in terms of psychographics, and any other variable that you could think of. Now, if you are still operating under that paradigm, you would be losing a lot of opportunity which are getting created in the market around you, and competition will be jumping onto those opportunities. So you can't essentially operate on a single target group anymore. And one of the signals or one of the places where you see that shift is that today no longer you have families or households watching television together as a group. Each one has got its own screen. Each one is pulling data basis their requirement. So you have moved away from households to individuals as a unit. That's one large area where you can see this change. Right? And if you are reaching out to multiple target audiences, and this is a significant departure from ways things have happened in the past, you need to have multiple propositions for each set of audience. Each set of audience is unique, and you can't have a one-size-fits-all proposition which talks to different sets in the same way. So you have to develop a different proposition and communicate individually to them. And the question then arises as to what would be the connecting thread among all these sets, right? If you have defined different target groups, if you have different propositions, how do I connect my brand and not let the core dilute? Right? So you have three things that you can actually work on: your brand essence, your brand personality, and your brand values. So there's a model which we used to follow in levers called the brand key, which had these three elements defined. So you need to keep these three elements constant across all the touch points, and while you change the other elements around the entire marketing mix to make sure that you're talking to different sets, but still not diluting your core. So that's one of the challenges that the brand marketers have to solve in the digitized era now. Coming to the proposition, so from one proposition, so this has been another gospel which we have followed for decades now. A brand needs to have a unique selling proposition. And the often quoted example is that of Dove, right? So Dove has been built since 1957 on a single proposition. Anybody here, what's that proposition? It's 1/4 moisturizing cream. Makes your skin soft and smooth because it has 1/4 moisturizing cream. And if you look at the 1957 communication and you look at the 2013-14 communication, it is the same. And that's how you build the unique selling proposition into your TG's mind, and that's how you occupy a space in the consumer's mind. However, now if you have different sets of audiences and these different sets of groups have become viable for brands to address because of technology, you will be leaving a lot of room you will be leaving a lot of room for competitors to enter and take away small positioning, small parts of those segments away from you. So the challenge again is, how do you maintain consistency in your brand communication and how do you address each audience separately? And data and technology are going to play a larger role in helping brand managers do that. So that's where the need for data and intelligence comes in. Right? So I'm going to elaborate a little more on that aspect in the next few slides. Right? So to illustrate this shift, right? So we have spoken about a shift where we need to define multiple target groups and multiple propositions versus the earlier era of having one TG and one proposition. How does it play out? So let's take the example of a mobile phone brand. Now it can potentially target students as a group very sharply, right? All your marketing communication completely focuses on students as a group. And probably they are looking for specs at a certain price and the fact that it should look cool on their hands. And you can tailor all your marketing messaging and your channels could be used accordingly. And you have a certain set of channels to reach them. There could be another set that you could target which would be of working professionals. And they may be looking for performance as an attribute. Right? And there would be certain channels to reach out to these working professionals as well. And the third set could be that of influencers. People who actually are technology enthusiasts who influence a lot of people downstream. Now, they could be looking for comparison versus the other products. They could be looking for tech superiority or value for money. And there would be different channels again to reach out to this set as well. Now, how do you strike the balance? Now, do you go after one segment? Do you go after all the three? That's a choice that a brand had to make earlier. And my suggestion or hypothesis is that today's world, the brand should actually go after all the three segments. If they don't, somebody else will. So that's where I'm coming from on this one. Yeah, let's also take a look at some dilemmas that we face at Flipkart. So at Flipkart, we have a set which actually places a very large premium on speed of delivery. They want the product as soon as possible in their hands and they're willing to pay a premium for it and not wait for the extra days. There is another set which actually wants the lowest price at all costs. And if they have to wait for extra couple of days, they will be okay with that. So this is a completely different set. And also the fact that these sets are not frozen in time. People actually move from set A to set B depending on the category they are purchasing, depending on the occasion they are purchasing for, and depending on the price point they are purchasing at. So it's not a frozen in time set, but it's a very dynamic set. Now, do you pick one? So do I, as a brand, talk about speed of delivery as my fundamental promise, or do I talk about lowest price? Right? So again, my submission in the digitized world is you can do both. You need to identify which set prefers speed of delivery, go with a speed of delivery communication, identify which set prefers a lower price and go with best prices proposition to them. And technology should help you identify the segment, give you those need segments and channels to actually reach out to them, and then appropriately build your communication and media plan around this. So that was the first aspect that I wanted to touch upon in the entire brand building process. You have the first two steps which are about identifying the target audience and building a relevant proposition for them. Once you have done that, you actually come to the part of building the creative for it. So creative is actually the bridge between what the brand wants to say and the way people want to see it. So that's your bridge between the two. And what has been the role of creative thus far? So far, creative has been the most important part of the brand building process. Why? Because the whole brand actually was dependent on that one idea. So you build a proposition, you come up with one big creative idea, and then you use that idea across all the channels with little or no customization. So if that one idea doesn't work, you're setting your brand up for a fair amount of risk. And if it works, there is fair degree of return also associated with that. So this world was of a high risk, high return game. And hence, the creative process itself was elaborate and fairly long. You had researches, everybody was trying to make sure their backsides are covered at every step. Until you come to the last step of coming out with the final creative. And the creative agencies hence became the most important stakeholder in the entire brand building process, apart from the brand team itself. So that's the world that we have been operating in. And I think it is changing now. As I said, we aren't going after just one TG. It's not just one proposition, and hence it's not dependent on one idea. You need multiple ideas at multiple points of time. And the other big change that creative is facing today is that their lead time is just not there. The time required to develop a creative has crunched from quarters to months to weeks now. And with programmatic buying coming in, it is real time. So how do I push a creative for an audience for whom I am just bidding right now? I have a certain set of information about them. I don't have a quarter to develop that creative. I have a few seconds to develop that creative and deliver it. So the role of creative fundamentally shifts from cracking that one big idea to delivering multiple creatives at multiple points of time to multiple audiences across multiple channels. And it's a huge shift. And that's why the creative agencies you see are trying to traverse this path and struggling at a lot of counts. Right? And that brings us to an interesting meeting point, or I would say collision of two worlds. And one world is the creative world, as we have seen and known for so many years from a brand building perspective. And the second is the data and the technology world. Because to make this happen, if you followed the same process as you have been following in the past, it would not just come together. You need data and intelligence to make it happen. And that's where technology comes into the picture. So your fundamental brand building principles don't change, but your dynamics are changing, your environment is changing, and your need to have intelligence around your audiences is very different. Does that make sense? All right. So this is where things start get interesting for the brand manager. Now he has been used to working with a set of agencies. Sorry, I think this looks very small on the screen. So I have got a list of agencies that a brand manager used to work with in the past, like the creative agency, the BTL activation agency, the PR agency. If he was higher up in the hierarchy to influence PR, then he would work with a PR agency as well, and a media agency. Now he has to deal with a social media agency, which says, I will manage your brand presence in the social world. He has to deal with a digital marketing agency, which says, I will optimize the digital channels for you and make your brand reach out to a certain set of consumers. You have an ad network, which tells you, we will give you unprecedented reach at unbelievable cost and deliver so many impressions. You have affiliate networks, which tell you that we will deliver unique audiences to you, which your brand has never seen before. You have the remarketing agencies and the CRM experts, which tell you that you are wasting a lot of time acquiring customers, you are better off retaining customers and building loyalty. Right? And you have the search experts, which tell you, why are you talking to people at the top end of the funnel? We have very targeted audiences which have come to the last step. You just need to show your brand and they will convert. Right? So a brand manager now is a fairly confused person in this entire scheme of things. Right? Who's doing what? What is it delivering for me? And is it ticking my objectives or not? And how is it adding up to my objectives? So you have multiple solution providers, but actually no solution. Yeah? So you have a creative agency which is trying to service the client by having digital, social, CRM arms, but they have no idea of technology that goes behind it. Then you have a digital, social, CRM agency which has a creative unit as well, which hasn't worked on brands so far. Then you have marketing agencies with tech and data capabilities. And then you have tech and data companies with marketing capabilities. Right? Have you seen all this? Yeah. All right. So that's where things get interesting. And does the brand manager have a solution yet? Yeah. So he's still lost, right? So I think there is a need for change in the ecosystem. I don't have a solution to this yet. I am still trying to figure a few things out. But nobody is connecting the dots. For example, we face a dilemma at Flipkart. Do I need to launch a $1 million campaign, or I have a 30 million customer base? If I send a targeted mailer campaigns or I run a campaign, will I get the same result or not? Right? We are fortunate enough to have data to be able to validate some of these hypotheses. Most brands do not have the luxury of this data. Hence, my submission is that the current solutions that exist in the marketing ecosystem are not sufficient and not holistic enough. And there will be a new order that will emerge. There will be new players that will emerge that will connect these dots for the brands. And how and when that will happen is of course for everybody to guess, but that's another hypothesis that should come true if things go the way they are going right now. All right, so that was the take on the second part, which was about developing the creative and what happens thereafter. This is the last part and probably the most ambiguous part, which is deployment of that creative. So you have to now choose certain media channels to actually deploy your creative and reach out to the audiences. This is where you're spending real money, right? Your marketing dollars, actually 99% of them are getting, or not 99, 85% of them are getting spent here, right? Media planning thus far, while you may say has been a lot of science, my sense is that it has been a lot of art as well. So you have the GRP data, the TAM data. We just heard a discussion where we talked about the 8,000, 9,000 TAM meters being extrapolated to 1.3 billion people. So we have worked with that model in the past. The only good thing about that model has been that everybody accepted it. Yeah, so a brand manager worked on it. The media guys worked on it. Everybody had a common currency to discuss. And hence it worked for you. While it may realistically have been quite off the mark, but it still worked to the extent that it worked. Now you throw in multiple channels, your digital channels, and proliferation of those channels, consumer moving from television to laptop to mobile to different screens, the whole thing goes for a toss. So we say that digital channels are far more trackable than offline channels, right? But till date, I don't think I have a real solution of identifying which part of my marketing dollar gave me what. Because in between, there is this whole gray area of attribution. So if a person came after 5 clicks to Flipkart and bought a product, was the first click important or the last click important is still something that needs to be figured out. So you have your own points of view on that. You could work with a point of view, but I don't think it's exact science. So while we would like to believe that digital marketing has a lot of science behind it, I think it's still imperfect science. So only brands which sell online will probably be 60–70% sure of how their spends are doing. Brands which are not present online will have no idea of how it's adding to their brand equity objectives, right? Also, another thing to highlight here is that a lot of times the brand owners themselves are confused about the objectives. What are they trying to measure? So they may be trying to measure sales growth, which is a fairly concrete metric to look at. But they are also responsible for brand health growth. So am I building brand equity or not? So a lot of times the creative agencies come back with the response that, hey guys, we built the brand from A to B. So what if the sales didn't move? So both are important. I think it's about figuring out how do I measure what's my larger objective, and what are the trade-offs that I'm willing to take. Also needs to be clear before you embark on these campaigns and start attributing to which channel is doing what for you. So I think this is another fairly ambiguous area that needs to get clarified and needs to get structured more and more for brand owners as things go forward. And technology is going to play a larger and larger role in making that happen for us. So that concludes my piece on the entire brand building process. So we walked through on how you identify the TG, how you develop the proposition, to how do you build the creative, to how do you deploy it, and how do you measure it, right? And there are a lot of questions that remain unanswered in parts of that journey, and what are the changes that are happening, and where are the confusion points. We saw them, and some likely solution that will emerge. Beyond this, I think there is an even larger question that the advent of digital era is going to pose on the brand building world. Right? And for me, that question is, should brand building or will brand building remain the sole purview of the marketing function? All right, so fairly debatable point, but a relevant one. And I have an example to back this up. So my hypothesis is that it should not. The reason is that with consumers, your face time is coming down so dramatically. Earlier, you had a face time with the entire family watching television together. Second ad, some people had 60-second ad, some people had 2 minutes ad, and things like that. Then you start integrating into programs. So a brand had an opportunity of face time, which was far higher in the industrial era. In the digital era, your face time is going to come down substantially. So what will matter in building the brand will be how do you appear to the consumer at every touch point that the consumer is interacting with the brand. So your end communication matters very little now. It's how you have come across at different points of time, when he has called your call center, when he has interacted with your service representative, when you have gone to deliver a product. your packaging, everything starts becoming far more important. Earlier, marketing dollars, 90% were being spent on building communication and getting that communication out. A lot of effort will have to go at the backstream now. So marketing doesn't remain a front-end activity anymore. It will have to become a business-driven activity. And that's why the submission, whether it should be in the purview of a select set of individuals in the company. As I said, each consumer touchpoint is now critical and worth its weight in gold to deliver the brand's objectives. I have an example here. So if I look at the low-cost carrier industry, it's fairly commoditized, right? The price point plays the larger role. One player has managed to distance itself. So it's almost twice the share of the nearest player in that segment. Now, if you look at how did they build the brand, or how did they build that differentiation? It's not because of multimedia or multi-million-dollar campaigns. We have not seen too much of them on ATL or BTL or even in digital mediums. If you look at the way the differentiation has got created, it's largely through the way they have played on every touch point. If you go back to your journey with Indigo, you think about it, how the menu appears, how the announcements happen, how the packaging of the food products is done, what is the language which is being used, what is the tone of that language, what is the ending announcement. The entire process that you go through leaves you with a distinct impression about the brand and what it's trying to do. And that is not visible, or that is not apparent, or that is not clear with the other players. And that's the difference between the two brands. And hence the submission that marketing function alone may not be able to influence all these set of activities. All right, so that's what I had on my side. I'll quickly recap through the points that we discussed. We talked about the earlier brand building process being focused on one target audience, one set of audience, versus moving to multiple and managing that transition. Moving from one proposition or USP to multiple propositions at multiple points of time to different sets of audience. We talked about the need for a new marketing ecosystem to emerge to help the brand owners connect the dots, because the proliferation is only confusing and not helping them come up to a final solution. The role of creative has changed a lot. It was predominant earlier, may not be as dominant now. Will data be the new king is the question I have. Probably yes. But creative will still remain strong. We discussed about the technology investment that need to happen now at the front end of the value chain. Because of the tilt which is going from production side of things to now the consumer side of things, more and more intelligence needs to be gathered about consumers. And hence you will need a lot of technology investment going into the front end. And the CMO becomes a big stakeholder into those investments. So slightly exaggerated headline, will CMO be the new CIO? And finally, will the CEO be the new CMO? Which is the last point which we discussed with reference to Indigo. And before I close, to add more fun and enjoyment to the life of the brand manager, as we discussed on how it's getting changed with the advent of digital era, competition will multiply. You have micro segments, you have multiple propositions, each segment becoming viable. You will have number of brands innovating and coming to occupy those small spaces, and each small space is going to become viable because of technology and the way you can deliver across that entire segment. Right? So I think fun times and interesting times. I wouldn't want to go back to my brand manager days, but that's all I had from my side, guys. Any questions? Yeah.
Hi, I'm Anita Nair from Hamas Media. Taking from your point on whether CEOs will be the next CMOs. I think most of us already are the CMOs. Yeah, but competition will multiply. So given that situation and the fact that there is fierce competition which is happening in the category that you're operating in,
yeah,
you know, how do you try and stay ahead of the curve as compared to the others? Because for any e-com online shopping, I mean, it's all about the product that I want, yeah, and I go scan sites, and you know, to me, which site is not as important as the product that I'm wanting to buy and at what price. you know, if that is the real clear focus on e-commerce online shopping,
Right.
because you want anywhere you are buying a cheap product, you know,
Yeah.
and inexpensive, let me not say cheap. Yeah, so you obviously choose your site accordingly and do that. So how
Sure.
do you, for example, ensure stickiness, loyalty, you know,
I get
all
it.
that? Yeah.
So let me start with, first of all, challenging the assumption. So I don't agree to the assumption that people are buying products just on which product and which price. I think a lot more goes behind the purchase decision. That's why it's not the lowest price site which sells the most. So we are not the cheapest player in the market, but we are the largest player in the market. So I think there is a lot more that goes behind that purchase decision. It could be small things like, what would happen if this product came wrong, or this product had a problem or a fault in it. So that could be a small consideration at the back of your mind. So it's not a pure functional robotic decision. Second, how do you differentiate? I think as I spoke about the Indigo case, right? You have different touch points. Getting those touch points in e-commerce when you have millions of customers spread across nook and corner of the country, across millions of products, is not easy. So that's where the brand's true strength will come out. So it's not about putting out the communication and differentiating on basis of personality. Yes, you could do that. But it is also largely about how do you bring alive the entire experience for the customer. And connecting those entire journey for the customer is not easy in e-commerce. It's a fairly challenging game. It's getting that product in the right time, to the right person, through the right channels. A lot of technology and operational grind goes behind it. So those are the two places I would distinguish on. One is, what is it that I am standing for in the consumer's mind when it comes to purchase? It's not just price, but there is something else behind it. And second is, how am I fulfilling that entire chain? Are the two things that will differentiate the winners from the other guys in the market. Yeah, sorry.
Rakesh Bhatia from Innovative Solutions. Thank you for your very lucid delivery, really impressive. My point is, today we are dealing with X numbers, which are going to explode and multiply over the next, let's say, 5 years, when the technology gives us that edge in terms of the bandwidth, in terms of the reach. Today you are operating with people who have access and who have passion for online because they don't have time. We will have that shift coming up as the age and demographics help us. How are you, perceiving and gearing up yourselves, let's say 2 years down the line when the numbers explode with the digital media and digital happenings? Thank you.
Fair point. I think we saw one of that challenge on Big Billion Day. So we suddenly shot through all the charts, right? And we were not able to manage some of the stuff that came our way. So we went and asked for it, but what came, we could not handle it. So I think those challenges will start hitting us pretty soon because of technology going across tier 2, tier 3. And that's why you see the kind of investments which are pouring into e-commerce right now. Those investments are trying to lay down the infrastructure from a technology point of view, from an operational point of view, to be ready for that wave of growth. And that's why you see the valuations, the investment, and everything coming together to make sure that we are ready to gear up to that demand. So that's the larger point that I had on how are we managing it. So we are building technology. We are building a lot of operational bandwidth. We are hiring people. We are already 33,000, 34,000 people through partners and other networks. So I think, to me, meeting that demand should not be a problem if we are gearing up for it.
What are your anticipated numbers, if I may ask?
So I don't think we have put that out publicly yet, but our numbers are not in percentages, but in multiples. So we already are a $3 billion top line company with 30 million customer base, and we are looking at multiples. So that should give you a sense of where we are headed.
Okay.
Yes.
My name is Ram N. Kumar, and I'm from Marketing. So my question is, as you said, CMOs are going to be new CIOs. So do you see CIO role and other roles getting divested into CMOs, and particularly IT becoming a vertical of marketing in person?
All right. I didn't mean it to be literally. So CEO is not going to become the CMO, right? He's not going to leave up finance.
The role. I'm talking the role.
So my point was to drive home the point that increasingly, if the company was spending 100 rupees on IT and technology in gearing themselves up for the demand and supply side of things, earlier out of that 100, 60, 70 or 80 was going into the supply chain and non-consumer facing parts of the company. I see this completely shifting where now 60-70% of that spend is going to go on the front end, which are consumer facing parts. So companies will have to connect to consumers in much larger ways through retail points, through distribution points, and directly having access to that consumer data to be able to do all that we discussed, right? Which is the revamped brand marketing process. So if you spend 60-70% of your technology investment on the front end, the CMOs are going to become a larger stakeholder. So it's not that the IT function will get subsumed under marketing, but marketing is going to drive a lot of technology investments of the company. That's the broader point. Yeah, please.
Hello. My name is Raj Kamath. Three questions that I have in mind. You talked about programmatic buying actually, right? In the US right now, the same technology has been induced in buying television, right? And you spend a lot of money on mainline media,
yeah,
right? And much as you hold the digital companies responsible for their, click-through rates and measurement performances, do you foresee yourself checking this out with the mainline television company where all the e-commerce guys spend such a lot of money on television? That is the first question that I have for you actually, one. Two, you talked about attribution model. It reminds me of a small anecdote, which is like, you all visit temples with multiple gods and you ask for a favor. If the favor is granted to you, who do you attribute, which god do you attribute to? So these are some of the things that really come across in the way it is. And the last question is, somewhere I read the article about Starbucks. Is it a coffee company or is it a digital company? Do you think Flipkart is on the way? Because I think you're one of the few companies that really get into a lot of analytics. And in analytics, I think your segmentation gets perfectly bang on. And there's no need for any creative guys to really sort of churn out something. Yes, you have your normal brand competitive single campaign that really goes across in terms of building your reputation. Right? But when it comes to segmentation, right, how much of analytics do you really do to sort of target the consumers given the technology that runs across with retargeting and you name it all? I mean, multiple jargons get used.
Yeah.
That's about it.
Sorry, I might have lost the train of thought so far. So the first question was about e-commerce companies. How do they hold the television channels accountable, similar to the way they hold digital marketing guys accountable for the spends that we do, right? As I said, while media planning, in one of my slides, I said media planning is a lot of science and there is a lot of art. So while media planners would like to believe that it's all science, but I think there's a fair amount of art that goes on there. Having said that, I think there is a common currency that has got developed and established there. And since I come from the traditional marketing or brand marketing world, we have a way of attributing that spend and figuring out whether that spend was effective or not. It is not to the last dollar, but it is to the last campaign that I do. So in this campaign, I am earmarking, let's say, $1 million for achieving a certain objective. Did I meet that objective or not? We have 50-60% confidence level of saying that yes, we did or we did not. So that's how it works in that industry, and that's how it has been continuing. I think there will be a fair degree of accountability coming in. If you are able to say that with a mobile phone in hand, if a consumer is watching a television commercial and you are able to actually find out whether he did that or not, it would add to the credibility and the accountability of the entire system. I think that's not very far away. I see that happening. Second, you asked about, attribution. So, attribution, we have been struggling for the last 4 years, right? Since I joined, I did not know digital marketing at that time. After about a year, I figured out something has to be done about attribution. Last 3 years, we've been trying that. Finally, if you give or take a few variables here and there, I think what we have seen is that still the last click is what people eventually boil down to, right? You try out different models, different hypotheses, different formulas, and you eventually veer towards the most comfortable one, because it's not just the marketing function, it's the entire company which needs to understand that, right? And your tracking systems have to evolve. Everywhere where the data is flowing needs to flow in that way, and your partners have to understand it, etc., etc. So I think given the small quantum of spend relatively, given the number of channels which are there, and given the variation which is not more than 10, 15, 20%, if I use one model versus the other, I think it's still inexact science, but it is being followed. So that's where it is. The third one about Starbucks being a digital company, I think each company has to go down that route. So if you are providing any kind of experience to your consumer, you need to understand what are you doing for them. Because your other opportunities of reaching out to them will become fairly limited. You will have hundreds of players vying for their attention, and it will become pull based. So they will pull content from you, not you being able to push out to them. So, is Starbucks a digital company? I don't know. I don't have the answer, but should it be? Yes. Because if it knows its customer base really well and has all the intelligence around it, the way it will be able to market and build its brand is going to be of a different order versus people coming in and walking out of Starbucks. And each company it will apply to Tanishq as well. Yeah, it will apply to most companies, and that's why the Indigo example is fairly relevant in a lot of these situations. Sorry, please.
Hi, I'm Achal Sharma from Accenture Digital. Hi. My question is that today the consumer who comes onto your website just comes on and he's a genuine consumer who comes, buys things and goes off. And today the consumer or the user is actually spending a very little screen time. Tomorrow when the time spent on the screen would be much more, how do you intend with your content strategy to engage that consumer onto your site on the maximum time?
We don't want to keep him on the site for a very long time. We would want him to transact and fulfill the order. Yeah, having said that, if I was a fashion portal, right, where I would want people to browse, and we are a large fashion player as well. I don't think it's about strategy. It's about identifying what need are you fulfilling for what set of audience. So we also have Myntra, which is again a different player, while it's the same group, right? So there the content strategy and the way consumer engages and browses and discovers Myntra is going to be different from the way it happens on Flipkart. So if Flipkart is for mass fashion, Myntra will be for people who have a taste in fashion or discerning fashion users. So if you see the way the sites are built and the way the whole navigation plays out and what content comes first versus what content remains below is going to be very different from what happens at Flipkart. So Flipkart is probably more of a branded purchase where you know the brand, you know the size, and you're looking to make sure that you're getting the best service possible. So each company or each site is going to come up with its own set of consumer variables that they are going to build their experience on. And that differentiation will start becoming visible and apparent as things move forward. Today it's one size fits all. So everybody has evolved from the same base. We didn't have the need to segment consumers. Now the base has become large enough for us to segment it. And that's why Myntra is a different entity, because that base is going to become large enough for it to have its own play. Right? So I think that's how we are viewing the content and the evolution of that content, depending on who we are servicing and what is the need that we are fulfilling for that consumer. It's not to maximize time on the site, but it's to maximize the fulfillment of that need.
Thank you.
Yes.
My name is Milind. I work with Madhouse. My question was, you have touched marketing, branding, consumer journey, and so on and so forth. If you would also try and highlight efforts that you take to try and skill your teams in general, because if you look at the whole digital marketing space, right from social to CRM to data to targeting to ad networks to SSPs to programmatic direct, premium ad networks. I mean, you have so many layers in the middle. How do you ensure, or what steps do you think this collective group should try and take to really be skilled and be up the curve? Because by the time you learn a technology, it's gone.
Yeah.
Right. So, how are you doing that internally, and what do you think a tips would benefit this larger audience in terms of how to actually grow that whole ecosystem at a skill base? Because when we as advertisers try and find out talent, we find that's one of the biggest challenge for us, that finding the talent is and retaining it is the most difficult.
Even more difficult.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think we see revolving doors in a lot of these verticals now. Yeah, so we were looking for a digital marketing person, and one thing that the recruiter that we were working with came back and said, I'm not going to promise you stability. I'll bring you profiles. The one thing you guys need to compromise is probably stability. So that's a telling statement on how things are. So I think what connects things for us is we try and get the best of the talent from a basic skills point of view, intellect, basic understanding of the ecosystem. We also place a very heavy premium on curiosity and willingness to learn. So first filters are these basic filters which tell us that, okay, if the person remains in this field for some period of time, he will be able to develop skills and expertise as things go along. One way of approaching it. Second is we put all of them together in one group where each person feeds off each other. So you have social media team working with the SEM team, working with the email marketing team, working with the SEO guys. So all of them understand where are we all headed. And there is a uniformity of command which tells you that, okay guys, we are here, this is what the brand or the business objectives are, this is how much we have progressed, and this is where each function is contributing to that growth or not being there. So I think we need to break the silos and put them together is the other big requirement. And the third one I think is, and which I see lacking in a lot of places, is to always start with the brand's bigger objectives and then flow it down into what technologies we are using, which channels are we using, and how is it all adding up. I see us getting lost trees for woods or woods for trees, so whichever way that thing goes, right? So I see us getting lost there. So we are trying to do a lot of things in a lot of ways because everybody else is doing it and it's really cool, but we don't know how it's adding up to my business objectives. So those three things, if we get right, getting the basics right in the talent, putting them together, not letting them work in silos and ensuring that everybody is feeding off each other. And third is ensuring everybody gets the big picture. I think then that's how it will all add up. Otherwise, it will remain the way it has been running for some time now. Please. All right, guys, this is the last question.
The e-commerce guys have always been saying infrastructure is an issue. So in the new future or for trying to circumvent that, would you want a brick and mortar in semi-urban areas as outlets or hubs for yourself?
So I think globally omni-channel is the buzzword. Yeah. Now whether we want to do it and will we do it in the next 2 years, or I don't have the final answer on that. But the idea will be to fulfill the consumer's need. So today the consumer's need is being met by an online channel better than the offline channel, if that's the larger understanding, right? We are trying to make sure that it goes wider and wider. So we have gone from 100 cities to 200 cities to 350 cities and tying up everywhere. And we are trying to cut down the time to reach those. Now today in a metro, the expectation is that if I am ordering today, I should get it either today or tomorrow. This expectation did not exist 2 years back. Now we have to put up systems in place which will make sure that we meet that expectation in a metro where people get their orders within today or tomorrow. Now today in tier 2 cities, they are happy with a 3-day or 4-day or a 6-day delivery. Now when that reaches to a 1-day or next day delivery, we will have to put things in place which enable that 1-day delivery. So if you look at general consumer trend, people would want the product faster and faster in their hands. If I have already paid you, for example, 5,000 or 13,000 rupees for a phone, I better get it as soon as possible so that the risk is minimized. So increasingly, the trend will be towards cutting down lead times, reaching as close to consumer as possible. And if that involves setting up a shop close to their house or wherever they are, it would be done. Sorry, one
small question. Ravi, this is Devanjana. So I have been shopping with Flipkart since last 4 years. In fact, Flipkart was the first online shopping that I tried. I bought my first smartphone from there. When you guys started, your main media of connecting to consumers, it was social, it was all digital, you used to send mailers. Then suddenly, you started doing all those traditional media like print and a lot of TV ads.
That was because of me. So you can blame me for it.
So yeah, my question is related to that itself. It's a very expensive media, but the kind of consumers that Flipkart or even the Amazons, they are targeting, they are mindful. So whenever I go to a shopping portal, I would compare prices all across all of these shopping portals. I would read the reviews. I would, look up the seller, whether it's a good or a bad seller.
Sure.
The consumer is aware. So why do you think that, you needed to put so much of money in traditional media channels?
All right. So I've been asked this question very often, and given I'm attending similar gatherings in a lot of places, this question comes up. Being a digital player, why do you spend money offline? I think if we hadn't spent that kind of money in the offline channels in 2011-12, we wouldn't be sitting here. I wouldn't be called here. So I think for any industry, so e-commerce today is still a nascent industry. It is still less than 1% of retail, right? So if Indians are spending 100 rupees, we are less than 1 rupee of that. So there's a long way to go. But it has grown tremendously in the last 3-4 years because it has consumer traction. There is a need which is being met, which is being fulfilled by the e-commerce players. Now, while we have reached a certain level of maturity in the metros and markets like Delhi, and people like you and me have become fairly aware and do it every day on mobiles and things, there's a large chunk of audience outside which is not conversant with e-commerce. They don't know. They have a lot of apprehension still, and they are still limited to a WhatsApp or a Facebook on mobile. Right? And this audience is expanding very fast, much faster than what's happening here. So I think there is a need to make sure that we connect with them as well, which are not as digitally savvy as people like us are. And second, I think given the headroom to grow, there will be investment across all channels. So we are not being partial to one channel versus the other. It's not that we don't spend money on digital channels. So we do have a fair bit of digital marketing initiative which goes on within Flipkart. So I think it's about getting the reach right, talking to the right consumer at the right channel, and we are not mature enough to be able to ignore any of these channels, which still have a very large reach. So interestingly, among the media channels, while digital is growing by 35-36%, TV is also growing at 13-14%. So it's not that TV is declining in India or digital is gaining in expense of TV. TV is still the dominant channel and growing much faster than other channels like print or outdoor or radio. So there is merit in considering usage of some of these channels because of certain obvious reasons. Yeah. Thanks a lot, guys.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ravi. Well, let's have another huge round of applause for a wonderful, wonderful keynote session there.